Hey guys, welcome back. It's Ripe again, back with more Just Know HOA stories. Without wasting any more time, let's dive right into the title story. So I am a 53-year-old man who lives alone on a farm. I never met a woman that I was particularly interested in, so I am unmarried and instead live and work by myself. I was born and raised on a farm and learned how to take care of animals and work the land before I was even old enough to talk. My parents loved their farm and instilled in me many tools of the trade that I have grown to be grateful for. I run a dairy farm, so none of the animals are even sent to be slaughtered, and instead they produce milk until they get old and then they live out the rest of their lives in a different area of the farm. I also got a good amount of chickens because they are fairly low maintenance but excel for a good amount of money. Being in charge of a farm is a lot of hard work, and I do hire people to help out, especially if an animal gets sick or is preparing to give birth, as you can never be too careful. I have a younger sister, but she was never that passionate about working the land, something that is understandable as she found her calling teaching preschoolers, so I ended up taking over ownership of the farm when my parents were old enough to retire. They continued to live on the farm and help with small things, but they were not officially working there. Both of them have passed on, and I miss them dearly, which is why I do my best to keep things running efficiently in their honor. My sister Jenny is married and has 2 kids. They are both in college and visit the farm often, although they came around more when they were younger. They would spend a weekend or even a full week working and hanging out with the animals when their parents wanted some time alone or went on a vacation. I got a good relationship with them and love them as if they were my own kids, and I am lucky to be part of their family. After taking over the farm, I quickly learned that there was a lot more to it. Besides feeding the animals and taking care of the lawn, I had to keep a positive relationship going with suppliers and people in the area who were close enough to my property to be impacted by it. I like to think I'm pretty good at that aspect of the job, as I'm a naturally social person and I enjoy spending time with people, so I have a good rapport with nearly everyone I work with. People generally like to support farms as we provide a good amount of products that are used in everyday life, so without us, you would not be able to have eggs with your bacon or milk in your coffee. Basically, I have a support system within the community that keeps me going if things get rough. A few years back, a homeowner association formed in the area, despite there being no real need for one. They asked if I wanted to join, and I politely declined as there are no homes particularly close that would take an issue with things like the color of my house or what sort of decorations I put up. Plus, I have to take care of my property in order to keep the animals happy and healthy. The grass never really needs to be mowed because the cows graze on it, but I still keep an eye out for bugs or anything else that could make them sick. The fencing around the property is not exactly the most beautiful, but it is sturdy and keeps the animals safe. I've never had any complaints, so I wasn't sure the HOA would be able to do anything for me. They continued asking every week or so in hopes that I would agree, but I continued to refuse their offer. I'm not sure why they wanted me to join so badly, unless they were hoping that having me on their side would make others want to join, but the real reason is anyone's guess. At one point, the guy in charge, Adam, told me that I should sell my land if I was gonna refuse to join, which is beyond obnoxious. The idea that I would give up the farm I was raised on just because some HOA member wanted me to is stupid, and I told him as much. I have a feeling that that specific incident was what made him dislike me so much. I'm pretty sure they signed me up for a bunch of different newsletters because I started getting stacks of spam in my mailbox that I know I did not even sign up for myself. It was the usual stuff like clothing stores, restaurants, and anything you can think of. It was annoying, but I just tossed everything in the recycling bin or shredded them up to make bedding for the animals. Adam had mentioned something to me about how he could make it all stop if I joined up with them, but that was not enough to sway me. They tried to get other residents against me by lying, saying that I was abusing my animals or ripping people off. I was shocked and started to tell people that it was all made up, but I was more trusted than Adam and his buddies were, so people brushed everything off as rumors. That was one of the first big things that they did to piss me off. Despite not being part of the HOA, they consistently requested that I change different things on my property. They complained that my farm was an ugly color and needed to be repainted, or that my farming equipment was too loud for them. Again, it was not like they were living next door to me and could actually be bothered by anything I did, so I ignored their requests and kept everything as it was. That was around the time I started receiving threats. They started as letters from Adam that requested I join yet again, although the language used was definitely edging towards aggressive. Like all the other junk mail, I ripped it up or tossed it out as there was no reason to keep them around. I left one in a folder of important documents that I kept in my closet just because I thought it might come in handy later. The letters got worse and started to devolve into being genuinely threatening by claiming that they would hurt my animals if I continued to refuse, but now the letters were not signed by Adam anymore. I think he was trying to make it seem like someone I did not know was sending them to me. I probably should have reported them to the police, but I really did not think it would go anywhere that would be cause for concern. They struck me as empty threats, so I treated them as such. Eventually, the letters stopped and were replaced with similarly worded phone calls. Each call featured someone yelling at me and threatening to take action if I continued being so stubborn, and I started hanging up the second I heard a raised voice. I ended up blocking the different numbers so I would not have to worry about it anymore, since I couldn't just turn my phone off or quit answering. I had other people that wanted to contact me and I could not risk ignoring their calls for any reason. So when those started to subside, I let my guard down slightly as I wanted to get back to putting all my energy into my work. I went into town for supplies one day and everything seemed normal when I got back. The next morning I noticed that a few of the cows seemed sluggish and were refusing to eat. That is definitely abnormal behavior, so I called up the local veterinarian who always cares for my animals and asked if he could come over sometime that day just to look at them. I had to wait until late afternoon as he had other patients to see and surgeries to perform, but he took one look at the animals and turned to me in confusion. He said that the cows showed signs of some form of poisoning, either from pesticides, copper, or some other source. I was equally confused as I keep the grain I feed them in airtight containers in my barn and I don't use any sort of pesticides or poisons to get rid of bugs or other critters. I threw out all of their food just to be safe and replaced it with new grain that I knew was free of anything that would hurt them, and I kept a close eye on them for the next few days. There wasn't much else I could do and I was at a loss for how this had all happened. Now I know that Adam poisoned some of the food while I was out, probably in the hopes that he could kill enough of my animals that I would have no option but to sell the land itself. There were a few weeks where nothing much happened and I started to forget about all the various issues, instead focusing on my animals. I went to bed one evening and ended up waking up at about 2 in the morning to the sound of my dog barking. He is a stray that wandered onto my property. He did not have a microchip and I posted flyers all around, but no one came to claim him. He's not much of a guard dog, but he will bark when he sees a stranger. I got up and looked outside, but I could not see anything that would imply someone was trespassing, so I brushed it off and assumed he saw a rabbit or other wild animal, so I went back to sleep. I woke up the next day and started my usual routine of caring for the animals and collecting the milk and eggs. I got through the majority of my duties and noticed I was running out of food for myself, so I got in my car and began the drive to town. When I got to a sharp turn in the road, I attempted to brake and found that I was not slowing down no matter how hard I stepped on the pedal. I was panicking at that point and I did my best to stay out of the way of other cars, but I eventually had to make the choice between ramming into another vehicle or driving into a pole, and I chose the latter. A lot of this story is pieced together from things I was told later, mostly from my nephews and Jenny. I managed not to hit other people, but I was in pretty bad shape. Thankfully, the car I avoided hitting stopped and called 911, so paramedics arrived on the scene within minutes. I was transported to the hospital where they rushed me into surgery and actually put me in a medically induced coma due to the severity of my injuries. By the time Jenny and the boys arrived, I was already out of surgery, but the doctors were keeping a close eye on me just in case my condition changed. My car was towed away and no one thought to look it over because there was no reason to assume it had been anything other than an unfortunate accident, and I could not explain that something was off. Jenny stopped by the farm a few times to check on things, but she did not have the ability to stick around for too long as she had her own job to get back to. She picked up the important documents our parents had stored theirs the same way as me, and took them back to the hospital just in case they needed any of them. While I was in my coma, the HOA was working hard to take my land from me. They forged documents and lied about me being dead so that my farm would be put up for sale for them to buy and use as they wanted. My neighbors noticed everything that was going on but did not say anything because they were afraid of what Adam and his people would do to them if they told. I don't blame them, since I know everything he did to me and I wouldn't have wanted someone else to experience that. What they ended up doing is they sold and rehoused all of my animals except for my dog, who was picked up by one of my nephews and stayed at his house the entire time I was in the hospital. Adam had everything on my property demolished with no regard to the foundation that already existed. They built an incredibly ugly building in its place with a huge pool behind the structure. They turned it into their own personal clubhouse and threw more than one party on the property. None of them bothered to take care of the trees or plants on the land, and they didn't care if they made a ton of noise late into the night. According to my neighbors, they made all sorts of ridiculous rules and requests just to exert power over the entire community, from telling people what kind of flowers they were allowed to grow in their yard to even limiting the number of cars that were allowed to park on the street. It was basically an HOA dictatorship. I think one family moved out during the time I was in my coma, and I know many more were considering it. My nephews visited me every day and talked to me about whatever was going on in their lives, whether it be new girlfriends or interesting classes they took. Eventually, I ended up waking up from my coma. I was understandably disoriented and eager to learn about what happened to my farm. The whole story came as a shock, but I started to put the pieces together in my mind of what actually happened. I recalled how my brakes had stopped working, and upon hearing this, Jenny called the police department and had them send over an officer to talk to me. The first thing I mentioned was the threats, but I quickly realized that would not go anywhere, as the only letter I kept had likely been sold or thrown out before they demolished my house. Jenny pointed out that she brought my documents over and looked inside to find the one letter I had kept. It was not exactly proof of anything nefarious, but it did show that Adam had been harassing me and mentioned using violence to get what he wanted. I told the officer about my brakes the day of the crash, and he seemed to perk up, likely excited at the thought of investigating an actual crime and not some whack jobs conspiracy. So then he went off to get my car and take a look at it while I remained in a hospital bed. My body had pretty much healed from everything, but the doctors were keeping me a little longer just to be cautious. It took a couple of hours, but the police eventually came back and informed me that the brake line of my car had been cut, which caused me to crash. They asked if I knew anyone who would want to do such a thing, and all I could think of was Adam. I mentioned how my animals had mysteriously been poisoned a few months before, and how my property had been sold against my will to Adam. They ended up getting a warrant to search his house and found pesticides and multiple letters that detailed his plan to get rid of me. They were hoping that I would die in the crash, but when that did not work, they found another course of action. That was more than enough to have him arrested, along with the other members of the HOA. Adam was definitely the brain behind the whole thing, but the rest of them knew what was going on and continued to work with him despite knowing that they were breaking the law. I took them to court and sued them for as much as possible, since my medical bills alone were way more than I could have ever hoped to afford. Without my farm, I had no way of earning money and nowhere to live. I was temporarily staying with Jenny and her husband, which was not ideal, but it was all I could manage. Unsurprisingly, I won the court case and was awarded $2 million plus my property. Adam was also instructed to pay whatever it took for my farm to get back into working order, and that alone cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Adam was sent to jail for a number of things, including attempted murder, and I don't think he'll be getting out anytime soon. My farm is not quite back to the scale it had been before, but we are slowly getting there, and I have high hopes that it will be even better than it once was. And yeah, Ripe Stars, it feels like the one thing that HOAs hate the most is farmers. I guess usually HOAs are comprised of city people, and I can see how some of those entitled folks hate farmers. However, it is good to see that in the end, the farmer came out on top. Either way, if you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video and also leave a comment if you want to support me. Your help is very much appreciated. And the next one is titled, I Reported My Neighbor. Tonight a bunch of my neighbors called me out to tell me my car had been sideswiped along with another car in front of me. They saw the car leave though. I thought I had no other option than to call it into my own insurance in the morning. Then some other neighbors came out and pointed out another car down the street parked in front of a neighbor I pass by all the time. They said it was that car that hit my car. I walk down there and there is a party on the front lawn. I see the car and the damage to the front, and I asked them who the car belongs to and if they saw the accident, and they all said no. It was apparently really loud and the whole street heard it happen. Then, as I am inspecting the damaged car, the neighbor finally comes out and says, "We will take care of it." And I was like, take care of what? He said it was his car, and I asked who was driving and if I could talk to whoever was driving. He said the guy was not there and proceeded to say he will come see me in the morning and take care of it. I said fine and walked back, but my neighbors were still congregating and said I need to file a police report if I cannot get any info from the guy. I went back and talked to the guy and explained I really need the info, or at least meet the guy that was driving, or I need to file a report. And I really did not want to do that, but I needed something. He kept saying I should trust him, and I told him it's not that I don't want to trust him, but it also doesn't help that he denied it when I initially asked and only came forward when I found this car. I said I'm not angry, I just want to know what happened. He said it was some young guys in the house, but he did not want to go interrogate. I ended up calling the police to file a report, and he and his wife came out when the police came and said it was his wife that was driving and did not want to confess because she was scared. I feel so terrible for calling the cops because I see this neighbor all the time. We don't speak, but we do say hi. I told my dad afterwards and he said I did the right thing because they could deny it in the morning or the suspect car could be gone. He said if they were honest people, they should have confessed in the beginning when he saw people coming out of their houses to see what happened. Also, turns out the car in front of mine that got damaged belonged to one of their guests. Mine was door damage and a missing mirror, but theirs was in the back corner and wheel that seems like it will be a totaled car, but I still feel guilty. Did I jump the gun by filing a police report? Comment number 1, not the a-hole. They were clearly joking you around, hoping you would just go away and foot the bill for their DUI. Screw that, calling the police was the right thing to do. Answer to this, absolutely. I mean, come on, she was scared? Of course you're scared when you sideswipe somebody, but you're a grown-ass adult. You did significant damage in front of an entire street of your neighbors. You don't hide and pretend like nothing happened. You are not 13, you know better than that, and an entire party and her husband playing along and denying it like this is high school, and you're trying to make up a fake story for the principal. OP, don't feel bad because they are your neighbors and you see them all the time. You are their neighbor and they were willing to sideswipe your car, not say anything to you, and then lie to your face when confronted. Don't waste mental energy having more regard for them than they have for you. Come on, sideswiping 2 cars on a residential street? And doing so much damage on one of them could be described as totaled? That's either drunk or texting, or stupid, and either way, it's careless driving. What if a kid had been playing there? It's not like you went over there just to shame her. You went over there and called the cops to make sure that your ass was covered for the damage that she did. If she feels ashamed, which she should, that's just a byproduct of having made a huge mistake. And then another comment, not the a-hole, and listen to your father, he is absolutely right. I bet they were covering for someone who was drunk and possibly drunk underage, and they were hoping it will all go away. But getting a police report filed is definitely the right thing to do. And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you think that OP was the a-hole for filing a police report on his careless neighbors or not? I would say OP was definitely not the a-hole and he absolutely did the right thing. These neighbors are careless and entitled and definitely deserved a police report. You cannot have that trailer. So this is another story of getting an HOA to back down with a side of how dare you. In early November, my aunt Anne, who lives with me, brought a cargo trailer onto my property with the intent to unload her possessions from it and eventually sell it. Now, she did this with my full knowledge and consent. I had already double-checked the CC&Rs and the only mentions about trailers really was one section about not parking them on common areas, which my property is not, so I approved it. The trailer then shows up and I am a little taken aback since what I thought was going to be a semi-tasteful cargo-made, manufactured utility trailer was instead a faded, abused and repaired U-Haul truck box welded to a flatbed frame. Ugly as sin. I am less enthusiastic about this, so I start pressuring Anne to sell it off. She works full-time day shift, so there's not a lot of light left at the end of the day to clean out the trailer, so it is slow going. Here's a bit of relevant context that will come into play later. I have a back lap. She sometimes sneaks out when I'm not paying attention and takes herself out for a walk around the neighborhood. She does not run away per se, as she always happily comes running back when I call for her, but she does like to go check out the neighborhood when she gets bored of whatever I am doing. I don't intentionally let her do it either and always call her back as soon as I notice, but it happens about once a month or so. The day before this exchange was one of those days. Next I know, it is the end of January and I get a nasty gram from our HOA compliance officer, ACC. ACC,
what is the deal with your trailer out front? You should know the rules of the covenant, right?
Me, yes, there are only rules regarding parking on the common areas. That being said, we are working on getting it sold, I just don't like it there either. ACC,
it has been there for some time and it should be behind the fence.
Me, according to what part of the CC&Rs? ACC,
we have talked about this when you were on the board.
Me, we will be selling it shortly and this trailer is entirely within my property. ACC,
behind the fence, just like a broken down car, cannot be on your driveway. Common area is on the road, not your driveway. You've been in meetings when we had these conversations.
And I have since thoroughly studied the CC&Rs. I don't have any way of moving it. We are emptying it out and going to sell it in about a month. ACC,
that is not the community's problem and you put it here. You of all people who have been on the board should be setting an example, not being the example. And you should come to the meeting tomorrow night and you explain and we can talk about it.
Me, sure. The same day right after this, ACC wife replies to a comment I had made in our neighborhood Facebook group that was asking about a black dog seeing wandering. I had casually mentioned, oh, it might have been mine, she went wandering this afternoon. No big deal, right? Not according to ACC wife. In another post she had commented, more concerned about folks who think it is okay to park their utility trailers and broke down vehicles in the front yard. There's no good excuse and rules are rules, yet there's a different level of comprehension. HOA meeting is tomorrow, support the community you choose to live in. Then on the dog post she commented, OP seriously? You're on a roll. You belong on the east side of nearby big city where you can live like a pig with no rules. Jesus, what a witch. Well, I have studied the CC&Rs and the bylaws and I was pissed now, so I replied to that. I don't let my dog go wandering on purpose. She gets out sometimes and I don't notice for a bit. I'm just glad she prefers to go down the cul-de-sac than crossing the busy street or wandering aimlessly. Also, why am I only hearing about this now? Support the community you live in, I hear. Yet first I hear about the trailer being a concern as a scathing nasty gram this afternoon. Community members talk to each other. That trailer has been there since November. People have had over 2 months to voice concern. 2 months to talk to me. I work from home. I'm not hard to contact. I'm not hard to reach. If I'm not home, chances are one of my roommates is. If anyone had talked to me, I would have told them it was only temporary while we clean it out and get it ready to sell, and would have hastened the timeline for removal. I'm under the impression that while it is an eyesore, I'm not breaking any rules by storing it on my property. No one ever said anything, so between bad weather, holidays and busy holiday schedules, we've been taking our time. If my community would have spoken with me, I also would have told them that I agree it's an eyesore, and if I would have known what it was or the shape it was in, I never would have allowed it to stay. I was thinking it was a tasteful cargo-made trailer, not a panel van body on an axle, but I'm committed now. But no one talked with me. The only community I find around here is my friends living elsewhere and my church family. No one talked to me, just went whining to the HOA like bullies. I am fully within my rights to allow my roommate's trailer there. According to the CC&Rs pointed out to me, 13.71 states that no trailer, or any similar equipment to the above, will be permitted to remain in any area of the common area. Section 1.06 states that common area shall mean and refer to the portions of the property and all improvements thereto owned by the association for the common use and enjoyment by persons living in the complex. 13.7 therefore only applies to vehicles and such that are on the common area, which my driveway is not, and therefore this does not apply to this situation. If the CC&Rs need to be amended to correct this, then so be it, but until they are, I am allowed to have that trailer in my driveway. Now that I know that this is a concern, I have moved up the timeline for its removal. I already have someone interested in buying it, we just need to finish clearing it out. I never heard another word after that, not even at the HOA meeting, where I was raring to rip someone a new one. How well. Sold the trailer a week later, no lawyers, just good old-fashioned putting people in their place. Definitions: ACC Architectural Control Committee Chair, the person responsible for keeping everyone in compliance with the rules. CC&Rs, the covenants, conditions and restrictions, the rules that control what we are allowed to do with our properties, not to be confused with the bylaws that control how the HOA is structured and is supposed to operate. And ripe stars, you know, that is one of the things I have noticed in many HOA stories. Most of the HOA committees and presidents, whatever, they don't even really know their own rules, and if you actually read these CC&Rs, you will find out that there are actually loopholes left and right that you can potentially exploit if you want to. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.